Welcome to Samvaad at Arunima Ankuran. Today we are having a conversation with Prof.Abhirup Das about the role of legal education in shaping society. Our guest, Professor Abhirup Das, is Assistant Professor of Law at MNLU, Nagpur. A very warm welcome to you and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, ma'am.
It's a pleasure. It's absolutely a pleasure. A word about Arunima Ankuran. This is an initiative for positive social change through self-development. The goal is greater well-being and happiness for all. At Arunima Ankuran, we believe that each person is unique and special in some way, that each person can make a difference, that each person can create an impact, and that's what inspires us to keep going. Our guest, Abhirup Das, teaches and researches international law and international relations. He has taught as an assistant professor of law in various law schools, including National Law University, Jodhpur, and Amity University, Kolkata. He has researched for a brief time at the Indian Navy's think tank, the National Maritime Foundation. Presently, he is an assistant professor of law at Maharashtra National Law University, Nagpur. His areas of interest include national security implications of acts by transnational and international actors. Thank you so much for being here. We'll start with your journey, how you got into this space and became a student of law and then a professor of law eventually.
Right, ma'am. So my journey begins in 2009 when I was preparing to give JEE. Back then, we had two JEEs, IIT JEE and AIEEE. So AIEEE paper one was for engineering and paper two was for architecture.
Hmm.
I was more inclined towards taking architecture.
Hmm.
So while I was preparing for that, there was a friend of mine who was interested in studying law, and he asked for a book on CLAT
Hmm.
to be delivered to him, and that was bought by my father and kept in the house somewhere. So apparently, the city in which my friend was, uh, it did not have that particular book. So we and no Amazon and Flipkart were not still, so famous and all. So I went through the book because I have this habit of going through books.
Hmm.
And while I was going through that book, I came across a lot of Latin maxims. And some of these Latin maxims really appealed to me. And it seemed to me that they were a treasure trove of wisdom.
Hmm.
So I told my father, just like that, that I'll also appear for CLAT.
Hmm.
And without any preparation,
Hmm.
I gave that exam and I got through RML NLU Lucknow. In hindsight, it seems like I should have prepared a little bit more because there are people who study for 3 years or 4 years for CLAT. But in fact, at that time, my priority was architecture. Anyway, so uh, I got through architecture at BIT Mesra,
Hmm.
and since Mesra was farther away from Delhi than Lucknow, where I'd gotten law, my parents convinced me to study law instead. So that's how I started my journey there. And like all law school students, especially those in NLUs,
Yes.
initially I was interested in working in the corporate sector and
Hmm.
had that utopian dream of retiring at 40 with a lot of money
Hmm.
somewhere in the hills. So that was the idea initially, but it all changed later. And while I was interning at Amarchand Mangaldas, back then there was no Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas or Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas. There was one particular organization only, that was Amarchand Mangaldas. And it was considered to be a very prestigious internship to get through. And somehow I got through that.
Hmm.
And right after that, that was December 2012. So, right after that, a friend of mine
Hmm.
who was more inclined towards human rights,
Hmm.
he invited me over to a students' protest in Delhi, which was happening right in front of India Gate.
Hmm.
Now, the protest was about the Nirbhaya incident,
Right.
and we knew about the facts of the incident from media, so it could happen to anyone, and we were all scared. When I went to the protests, I found out that most of the protesters
Hmm.
did not have any idea about the rule of law and how the accused must also be given a chance, because we might get an innocent person in custody anyway. So there were people who were saying that hang the accused from the lampposts. Somebody else was saying castrate the accused, and there was one particular student's political party,
Hmm.
can't say the name because of other reasons. I'm a neutral person politically, but then that particular political party was a very hardline political party, and the students started saying, at least the leader started saying, we have to fight the state.
Hmm.
The exact term he said was, हमें सत्ता के खिलाफ जंग लड़ना है.
Hmm.
And I was quite surprised because the government had nothing to do with the Nirbhaya incident.
Hmm.
Of course, more policing, better policing would help. So after a day at the protest, I left for Mathura, Vrindavan, and Agra. My parents took me away from Delhi so that I don't get involved too much.
Hmm.
Later, I got to know that one policeman had a heart attack and passed away, unfortunately, while trying to control the protesters.
Yes.
So that happened. And after that, I was flabbergasted. I did not know how to react to what I saw there in the protests and what happened to Nirbhaya. And right after that, I found myself quite alone in my mind.
Hmm.
And that happened at one of my cousin's wedding, which was, as usual, a big fat Indian wedding. So a lot of extravagance was there. And I was unable to understand the point of it all.
Hmm.
So yeah, I was still confused when I took the decision to withdraw my name from the placement process. And I told him that I'll be pursuing higher education. In my mind, I wanted to go to the Indian Law Institute to do my LLM because going abroad wouldn't be a very good idea
Hmm.
if you want to teach. It's not going to, like, if I take a loan, it's not going to be repaid by teaching anyway.
Hmm.
So that's the reason why I went to Indian Law Institute and I did my 2 years LLM there. I got introduced to international law in a greater detail there,
Hmm.
and my specializations were in uh, criminal law, human rights. My dissertation was in international humanitarian law, the law of war. So that's how it started. And I got through UGC NET the first time by luck and God's grace. I'm not claiming that I could have cracked it by myself. It just happened. And I was able to start teaching right away, fresh out of university. And the motivation for me teaching was the fact that lawyers can do a lot of change in society. They
Hmm.
are capable of bringing new countries into existence. If we just think about the past century,
Hmm.
we see that the father of our nation, the father of our neighboring country's nation,
Hmm.
as well as our first prime minister were all lawyers. And things haven't changed even till date.
Hmm.
We might feel like technocracy is the way it's way ahead, but then technocrats also have to rely on lawyers. In fact, lawyers sometimes behind closed doors laugh at the fact that everybody needs a lawyer, a priest, and a doctor. So you can't go through life without a lawyer, a doctor, and a priest.
True.
So, that's why, although AI is there and everything, lawyers are still a little convinced that their jobs cannot be taken away so easily. Reason being, they shape society. Lawyers shape society whenever they argue a case in court, which might have social implications, larger national or political implications. When they uh, engage in advocacy, whether inside parliament or outside parliament, when they engage in drafting of legislation, when they adjudicate, because all judges need to be lawyers first. So I found the teaching of law to be a very empowering experience, because I felt that if I could do some good to my students and if I can instill some moral values,
mm,
which I have learned from many of my professors, perhaps I would be able to contribute to a little good in society. It's not that I didn't think of myself litigating and trying to do good, but then I just figured one person can't do too much by himself.
mm.
But if one person can train, say, 10 people,
Yes,
that is sufficient for a career, because 10 people can do 10 lawyers, especially, can do such a lot of change by themselves that that can't even be imagined. We don't know what changes will come in the future,
that's true.
but if we look at the past, this thought at least holds true.
When we talk about justice and fairness, how do you see legal education actually shaping things in society? What are some of the cases maybe that come to your mind when you talk about this?
You're right, ma'am. So justice is something that we aspire to. It is not something that can be achieved. And I wish and hope that justice remains the same way, because those people who believe in absolute justice
Hmm,
are probably being very orthodox. And in a democracy, such kind of orthodoxy can actually be very dangerous. So there is no specific idea of justice that is acceptable to all. The law is but a tool to try to achieve that idea of justice. There are multiple thinkers on the idea of justice. It started with, say, Socrates and Plato, and we still have people who are thinking about justice and writing about it in our lifetimes as well. John Rawls, Amartya Sen, many people have talked about the idea of justice. But outside the books, the idea of justice in what is the real world versus the academic world,
hmm,
uh, the idea of justice seems to be a teleological phenomenon,
hmm,
because law itself is teleological. Justice remains something to be achieved.
hmm,
And fairness, again, although it's a principle of law
hmm,
to have things as just, fair, and reasonable,
hmm,
fairness is again, it's a little subjective, and it's very much dependent on the spirit of the times. For instance, earlier it would be fair in certain communities
hmm,
for a widow to self immolate.
hmm,
But now we can't even think of such a situation.
hmm,
So that was fair for them at
hmm,
that time.
hmm,
It's not fair for us right now. It would lead to some sort of justice for them,
hmm,
but we wouldn't feel that it's some sort of just, not at all. It would be a grave injustice if something like that happens. In order to teach my students what kind of things can be achieved with justice, there are multiple cases. Since I teach international law, the most important set of cases that I talk about are the Nuremberg trials. The
hmm,
Nuremberg trials for the trials of the Nazi German
hmm.
leaders, including their military officers and political leaders,
Yes.
who were responsible not just for Holocaust, but for some many crimes against humanity and war crimes as well. That, and then there's one more case which I refer to, again related to the Second World War. That is the case of Adolf Eichmann.
Hmm,
He was a Nazi leader
hmm.
who had fled to Argentina and was hiding under a new identity.
Okay. Hmm,
So Israel sent some of its employees
hmm,
to Argentina under false identities and kidnapped him from Argentina and brought him back on an L Air flight back to Israel.
Okay.
And thereafter, uh, he was prosecuted and punished for the crimes that he had committed during the Holocaust. I don't want to go into the details of the cases, but these are some cases where we see a very new thing happening. Throughout history, there have been many wars, many people have lost their lives, there have been terrible tragedies and terrible violations of human rights, but nobody talked about prosecution of the perpetrators. Although there's this idea that the Americans and their allies, who were also perpetrators of certain war crimes and crimes against humanity, got away with it, but something is better than nothing. So we got to start there. When I teach law to students, I try to teach them what is not justice first.
Oh,
There's
that's.
a particular case, Bhoginbhai Hirjibhai versus State of Gujarat. And in that case, a judge made a really, Supreme Court judge actually, made a really, uh, let's say, prejudiced judgment and opinions against Indian women vis-a-vis foreign women. Something to the effect that foreign women were loose, basically, in his idea, and Indian women were not like that. And this happened in the mid 80s. After that, we have come a long way, but I show that to them, and they themselves understand that things change with time, and what was considered to be still possible at that time is it's not something that can be tolerated in the 21st century, or maybe it should not be tolerated in any time, but especially in the 21st century. Thereafter, after teaching them what is not justice, we had this idea in the Upanishads of neti, that this is not that, this is not that. So similarly, I try to teach them this is not justice, this is not justice, but these are attempts to engage in the pursuit of justice. For instance, there's MC Mehta versus Union of India, which dealt with an environmental issue, and the Supreme Court uh, gave certain guidelines which are very important for our understanding of environmental law, and later the creation of the NGT, National Green Tribunal, and many other things altogether. I don't want to just talk about law in such a manner, but MC Mehta's case is a very important case in point, and there have been many cases like that. Everything from prisoners' rights to this protection of environment to you know trying to at least bring the perpetrators of the Union Carbide Company um, to justice. There have been attempts, haven't been successful all the time, but there have been attempts to achieve justice by way of legal activism. So that is something that I also put in front of my students. Mostly, I deal with the Nuremberg trials and the trial of Adolf Eichmann. And although things were not quite legal in Adolf Eichmann's case, it was also something done in the pursuit of justice. And the Nuremberg trials, again, nothing like that had happened in the past prior to the Second World War. But that was also a pursuit of justice. So that's how I try to hammer into the heads of my students that there is some ideal, some justice that we aspire to. Nobody knows what it is completely, but it is something that we must keep aspiring for through our acts every day. And generally, when we talk about justice, people say, who are supposed to do justice? The courts are supposed to do justice. That's why we put a justice in front of the names of the High Court judges and Supreme Court judges. That means that a lay person or a lawyer, they can just commit injustice all the time. Is that the case? So, in order to do justice, you need the participation of all people in a democracy.
Hmm. Right.
So, everyone must do justice.
Hmm.
Because when the preamble to our constitution says
Hmm.
that we are trying to make this constitution based on the principle of justice, equality, and liberty, we have this term justice, social, economic, and political.
Hmm.
Now, these kind of things require the legislature, executive, judiciary, and most importantly, the people to
Hmm.
follow.
Hmm.
So that's how I look at justice, and I try to put it forward. But it's not always successful with everyone. But that's not the point either.
Hmm.
We don't run an indoctrination camp. It's more of a teaching where people can and should contradict the teacher if and when necessary.
When we look at the role of legal education in India, for example, in the contemporary times, do you think it's going to create an impact socially in the long run?
Right, ma'am, it is already creating an impact socially.
Hmm.
We might be aware of Shreya Singhal versus Union of India. In that particular case, what happened was a student of National Law University, Delhi,
Hmm.
put a public interest litigation in front of the Supreme Court,
Okay.
and she got a particular section in the Information Technology Act
Hmm.
declared as unconstitutional. And prior to her attempt, what had happened was people were being arrested for very less small kind of things, such as annoyance, causing annoyance or disturbance to another person. All these minor things were reasons for which people could be arrested, and that particular provision was deleted.
Hmm.
This is one example. There are multiple examples. Law school students in NLUs try to give back to society through their legal aid committees.
Hmm.
There's a legal aid committee which tries to spread legal awareness, sometimes even get people to connect with the legal services authorities. Uh, so they do try to do some change. Additionally, there have been some initiatives by students as well as some professors.
Hmm.
The late Professor Shamnath Bashir had started this initiative called IDIA,
Hmm.
increasing diversity by increasing access to legal education. So that was an attempt to ensure that people from all backgrounds, especially economically vulnerable and backgrounds which are marginalized, they are able to come and study at NLUs. There are multiple situations where students are attempting to go and try to do justice in society through their acts.
When we talk about academic legal learning and real world challenges, how exactly do you prepare the students in the classroom to be able to do their jobs once they leave the campus?
So, to answer your question, ma'am, there are four kinds of qualities which are required to be developed in a student. The first thing is that of critical thinking.
Hmm.
The second is that of research.
Hmm.
The third is that of writing.
Hmm.
And the fourth is of speaking.
Hmm.
So, when we are trying to teach critical thinking to students, I gave an example of a case where a Supreme Court judgment was very obnoxious, and it's shown to the students, but then it's not commented upon,
Hmm.
and we let them come to their own conclusions. That's one of the ways of developing critical thinking skills. When we ask questions as well, they are problem based, so they have to exercise their thought processes. They have to try to remove their biases in order to come to correct conclusions. I use the term conclusions. in plural, because lawyers and judges, everyone may disagree with each other and still be right in their own way. So that's a value judgment, but then not all the law works like that only,
Mm.
or else it wouldn't change over time.
True.
Either way, there's then the research skills. The research skills are developed through these research projects that we give to our students,
Mm.
and they have to do the projects in a specific manner. They can consult us. They should, in fact, consult us. Not everybody consults, though. They should consult us to find more about a particular issue,
Mm.
and I ensure that students use AI to the least extent possible, or not at all, if that's the best thing. But AI can be used as a search engine. They can use it to find cases, find a lot of literature,
Mm.
which they could analyze and then eventually come to their conclusions. Now, when they do the research project, they also have to make a research project report in
Mm.
writing.
Mm.
So when they do that, they are actually developing their writing skills. And for developing speaking skills, of course, I encourage students in class to talk. But then there are multiple students from, again, vulnerable backgrounds and marginalized communities who are either unable or unwilling to talk. Unable because they haven't received the same kind of education where they can speak English really well,
Mm.
and unwilling is because they do not want to be looked down upon by their peers. So these two things are always there, and it's a challenge that we try to overcome. But then it's still a challenge. Then speaking skills are developed not just in the classroom but outside the classroom through various quiz, literary debate competitions, open mics, parliamentary debate competitions, moot court competitions. These things keep students busy and they develop their skills as well. Because although a student may ask a question or answer a question in class,
Mm.
they are not going to speak for an hour, which
Mm.
they might have to do in the future after graduating in order to bring in any kind of change,
Mm.
social change, or even bring in more change in their pockets. So both kinds of change. So they'll have to develop. It's something that happens over an entire lifetime,
Mm.
but then we start the process.
When we talk about the legal profession particularly, is there a code of ethics or a kind of a value system that you encourage the students to develop? Because this is a very important part of the criminal justice system, so to say, delivering justice in the long run. How do you look at it?
Right. So there are two things which come to my mind. The first thing is the fact that lawyers know that their client is guilty and
Mm.
still take up their case in court.
Mm.
That's one. And two, the lawyers are often accused, and sometimes rightly,
Mm.
accused of lying,
Mm.
not just in court but elsewhere as well, in order to get the best for themselves, for the best for their clients. Well, these two things happen.
Mm.
I'm not denying that.
Mm.
The code of ethics is given by the Bar Council of India,
Mm.
which includes an obligation to represent a client regardless of whether that client is guilty or innocent. I'll
Mm.
come to why it's necessary, but firstly, let me just explain how.
Yes, yes.
So, if even if a client is guilty,
Mm.
a lawyer must take up their case if the client approaches the lawyer. There are very few circumstances in which a lawyer can turn down cases. The uh, general public are not aware about this, but then it is there.
Mm.
The Bar Council of India, through the state bar councils as well, try to enforce this code of ethics,
Mm.
professional ethics, in fact.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
Now, why should somebody who knows that their client is guilty represent
Yes.
them in court?
Absolutely, yeah.
The thing is, if we don't do that,
Hmm.
there might be people who have been accused merely because they are good scapegoats,
Hmm.
and nobody would represent them in court, and that would lead to a disaster, that would lead to more injustice being committed.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that is the idea, that whether an accused is guilty or innocent is for the court to decide, not for the lawyer to decide. That's the court's job. Prior to this, in not so long ago, barristers were not supposed to know whether their client is guilty or innocent. If the barristers got to know
Hmm.
that the client is guilty, they were obliged to let the court know. So barristers would try to avoid cases where they knew that the client was guilty. So that's an earlier code, and it still was there in England until not so long ago. I'm not certain whether it's still there in England, but that idea is still there, that every person must face the court with representation.
Hmm.
So the saying goes that even if 100 people who are accused
Hmm.
go scot free, that's more um, acceptable than one innocent person being incarcerated. And unfortunately, a lot of innocent people are incarcerated. A lot of false confessions take place. A lot of things happen due to which people are incarcerated without actually being guilty. And the second thing was about lying
Hmm.
in court and outside court.
Hmm.
Now, if a lawyer continues to lie inside a court
Hmm.
in order to save their client,
Hmm.
at some point of time,
Hmm.
their credibility with the judge as well as their fellow advocates would be gone. So, in
Hmm.
order to maintain their own credibility, it's imperative for them not to just lie, but to find some contradiction or some way of circumventing the law, using the law to their client's advantage instead of directly lying that no, my client did not do this. Fine, but then how do you prove that? In order to prove that, they have to pick holes in the argument of the other side.
Hmm.
Um, if lawyers continue to lie in the commercial sector,
Hmm.
they're gone basically. Their entire credibility will be gone, and they would not be trusted at all. So you can't lie to your own employees if you are a corporate lawyer. You can't lie to the arbitral tribunals if there are arbitrations taking place. So that idea of lawyers lying is, I think, mostly there because of media and this mistaken idea about lawyers lying. Unfortunately, lawyers themselves take that seriously, the media seriously, and they emulate it. Some of them do emulate it, and then they lose their credibility.
You just spoke about the corporate lawyers. So, talk to us a little bit about the difference between litigation lawyers and corporate lawyers, and where are the students heading these days?
To answer your question, ma'am, the lawyers which go into litigation
Hmm.
have to appear before courts, and they have the right to appear before courts themselves. They can represent their client in court by way of the Advocates Act and the certificate of enrollment
Hmm.
which they get
Okay.
from the Bar Council. That authorizes them to
Hmm.
um, argue in courts. If an advocate joins a corporate firm,
Hmm.
partnership, a legal partnership, legal firm, or maybe a corporate house where they are in-house counsels,
Hmm.
they can no longer represent any client in court.
Oh, it's like an
If they
either
are,
or.
yes. So if you're working
Hmm.
as an in-house counsel, or you're working in a law firm,
mm,
you can't represent any client in court by yourself. So
mm,
there's a way of circumventing this law. People are kept on retainership.
mm,
So they won't be treated as complete employees.
mm,
They would be treated as lawyers on retainership for a particular amount of money so that they can actually represent their clients in court. And then also the benefits that need to be given to the employees do
mm.
not have to be given to the ones who are on retainership.
Mm.
So both
Okay.
these things are there.
Mm,
Corporate lawyers probably have it a little harder than litigation lawyers
mm,
because, of course, in litigation, it's a very difficult uh, profession
mm,
and kind of practice
mm,
in order to go up through the ranks
mm,
without having any prior relatives or without having come from a background where there are multiple lawyers.
mm,
In the corporate sector, the problems are different. Almost everyone says that the environment is very toxic,
mm,
but they have to try to survive there
mm,
because they have been made addicted to the money. And once one gets that taste of money, it's very difficult for them to change their lifestyle back to something more humble. So once people get into the corporate sector,
mm,
they change and they become very high flying, and be in Dubai one day and London the other day and Singapore the day after that, but they won't be having their feet on the ground so much so as a lawyer who's doing litigation would.
mm,
Uh, so that's why it's encouraged to go into litigation. After all, moot court competitions, which are very popular among
yes.
law students, uh, those are aimed to encourage students to go to courts and practice. The idea of national law universities was to make a generation of lawyers
Mm,
who would be practicing in the courts because the legal education back in the late 80s and early 90s had deteriorated to the extent that people who could do nothing else
mm,
used to do law,
true.
and people who could do nothing else in law
Mm,
would do academics in law. So, so being from a legal academy, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, but then people know this, and it's a matter of fact that that was the situation in the late 80s and early 90s. I'm not saying that the present judges who've come from that era are uh, all they did not all probably come into law uh, by lack of opportunities, but then some probably did.
mm,
So that's something we cannot deny. And it's not just judges, it's like lawyers, everyone,
yes.
lawyers, advocates, everyone. So the idea was to bring in more people into litigation. However, it failed,
Mm,
and now students want to go into the corporate sector because it pays more. And at an early age, it's better to repay your debts.
mm,
Law school education being very expensive needs people sometimes to take loans. At other times, they get merit cum need scholarship. A substantial number do get scholarships, but still, the ones who take loans or the ones who take money from their parents, they have to try and bring it back.
mm,
So that's why they join corporate sector. One of the reasons why I did not even try to go abroad for my LLM was this: the degree would cost so much and my living cost would be so much that I wouldn't think of going into academia. I would rather go into some other field where I would be able to get that money back because I would be destitute if and insolvent if I would not repay that debt. So that's a major concern. So students do try to go into law firms instead of going into litigation. Ultimately, a lot of them end up in litigation,
mm,
but they do not do so deliberately. Uh, it just happens.
You've been teaching across different law schools, and with your experience, what are couple of changes that you would like to see in the legal education system, and what are some of the strengths that you have been observing?
Ma'am, I think that in the legal education system, especially the NLUs, if you want to keep the NLUs working and if you want to keep them elite institutions where even people from all backgrounds can study, but then institutions which will not be too busy in compliances
Hmm,
with UGC and compliances with BCI, but being under MHRD, if they were brought under MHRD, things would have been much better. Like
hmm,
the IIMs and IITs, if they were declared as institutes of national importance and then given the adequate amount of uh, funds as well as you know the the audit of the utility of funds, all these things would have been easier. But now, whether it's a private university or a public university,
hmm,
they have to go by the BCI's norms.
hmm,
And unfortunately, not every university does that. Public universities mostly have to do that.
hmm,
Private universities do not always do that, but somehow convince the inspection teams that they have followed the
hmm,
procedures and whatever compliances were needed to be done. So I would like to change that fact. I would like these law universities to be more autonomous,
hmm,
at least the NLUs. Can't speak so about the private universities because they are there with a different reason. They do not have education as their primary goal,
hmm,
the administration at least. Their primary goal is that of revenue.
hmm,
So that is different. And public universities such as NLUs, we are different. We have to be given that kind of free hand in case if we want to grow, if we want to develop at a faster pace. Strengths are the fact that we are able to do a lot of innovative teaching in classroom. A teacher is sovereign inside the classroom. I say this to my students that nobody else, especially in this particular university and other universities as well, nobody will walk into the classroom and say what you're teaching is wrong. They can do that because they might have a different idea about what the law is or how it should be interpreted, but they wouldn't.
hmm,
So the fact that the teacher is the be all and end all in the classroom, that's a good thing, that's a strength.
hmm,
However, it could also be a weakness if the faculty is not competent enough. That's why I'm saying if it was under MHRD,
hmm.
things would have been a little better.
When you look at your own professors, talk to us about some of the ones who inspired you and were like role models because of the way they taught, perhaps.
Mhm.
Please talk to us about that.
Ma'am, there are two professors who have profoundly influenced me.
Hmm,
The first professor to have profoundly influenced me was uh, Professor P. Puneet.
hmm,
He's presently an associate professor at JNU, but prior to that, he was there at ILI as assistant professor.
hmm.
His knowledge was as vast as the ocean from the point of view of his
Oh, hmm,
students, such as myself, as vast as the ocean. We can't even take one drop and say that, okay, we are done with at least one drop of it.
hmm,
His knowledge, articulation, method of dealing with students, everything was really good. And his erudition is unparalleled,
hmm,
at least in my opinion. I haven't seen any other teacher to have such kind of erudition. Even after going to JNU,
hmm,
he continued to take our classes, and we would also go to him, meet him in JNU, and ask him about research proposals for other organizations or institutes. Suppose somebody wants to do a PhD somewhere else, we would still go to him, meet him at JNU, request for his comments or his advice, and he would give advice for free to anyone. Then my supervisor for my LLM dissertation, Professor Manoj Kumar Sinha, he was again a gem of a person. He had a lot of erudition in his subject. He would also uh, be very compassionate towards his subordinates, and at the same time, he would be very humble. And it's not something that's like a fake humility that people try to display at times. That I am so humble. I'm doing this. No, he was really humble from the bottom of his heart. So, being such an honest, humble, compassionate, and erudite person, he was able to inspire not just me, but many of my other friends as well. And we do discuss this in legal circles, legal academia mostly, that he's a very good man. People do not have words to describe him. Now, the reason why we discuss more about Professor Sinha is because he's at a more senior position. He was the director of ILI, and now he's the vice chancellor of Dharma Shastra National Law University in Jabalpur. So his leadership skills could be seen from the positions that he has held, which I cannot say about Professor Puneet because he hasn't held any administrative positions when I was around. So that's something that I would like to put out there, that Professor Sinha, I would still recommend whoever's seeing this video, if you want to study law in the higher education, as in research in law, you should try to go through the works of Professor Sinha and maybe even drop him an email. If he gets time, he'll certainly respond to it.
For any students of law, what are some of the things that you would suggest they do in order to achieve excellence?
Firstly, ma'am, they have to give up Instagram. That app is very dangerous for the
Yes.
human mind. So if they give that up, the other things can be cultivated in them. How can I teach critical thinking skills to an 18-year-old who's busy seeing reels of, say, other people doing hula hoops or whatever?
Absolutely.
It's infantilizing the entire adult population, and they are unfortunately getting exposed to it at a very young age. So they think that browsing through Instagram is just another thing, and there's nothing wrong with it. So I try to enforce that in the classroom, but I'm not too much of a harsh enforcer. So I see students trying to use Instagram behind their laptops where they are pretending to take notes. And I sometimes call them out for that, but that's about it. But then they must give up Instagram, and then they can start developing their critical thinking skills, their reading skills, writing skills, speaking skills, because Instagram will kill all of those.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for being on Ek Samvaad at Arunima Ankuran. It was such a pleasure having you, and we wish you the best in your journey as a legal education expert, as a professor. So, thank you very much, and all the very best to you. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me. Thank you.